I would say, well, you mentioned Jalen Hurts, obviously, and DeVonta Smith. I mean, he looked really impressive.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
I noticed a big difference, from, the beginning of last year. Training camp, he was kind of a rookie, not really sure of his spot. And I think he came back much more confident, much more assured of himself and everything. And I think, from a 55-minute practice and stuff, you can kind of tell that he's at a different level so far this year. I'm expecting kind of big things from him.
Appreciate you streaming on in here on Birds 365. You got your boy John McMullen, you got me, Jody McDonald, and we've got our pal Martin Frank from the Delaware News Journal, who's chomping at the bit, who's holding his phone under the table. You can't see it right now, but he's waiting for that email to find out, is he going to be able to attend Eagles session tomorrow or Wednesday? Martin, your life depends on this. Give us a prediction. Which day are you going to head north up to the NovaCare complex?
I'm saying Wednesday.
Yeah.
They're not going to cancel. You mean they're going to go through all 6 sessions? They're going to put all 6 in? Damn, that hardworking football team we have.
Hey, you got to get that hour in. I mean, 55 minutes,
That's grueling. It is grueling, but they're going to do it. They already went bowling, Martin, so I'm with you. I'm going to say they're going to go. They've already done the team building, right? So why not? You cut from 13 to 6. Let's do 6. I'm betting on Wednesday. So if you're a betting man and listening or betting lady, probably bet on Tuesday because I don't win a lot of my bets. But I'm going to bet Wednesday. Saw you pop in the green room, Martin, while Jody and I were discussing the offensive play caller and Shane Steichen, who was last year down the stretch of the season. It's more solidified this time. I think, by the way, I think it's fair to Shane Steichen because he deserves credit when he's calling the plays. And it was, I'm not saying hidden, but the Eagles didn't make a big deal out of it last year. Your take on Nick Sirianni stepping back from being a play caller, kind of a bold move because he was hired to be a play caller.
I think it's a good idea. I mean, you have an offensive coordinator, let him coordinate the offense. And, it's like, I think it was like you were saying, I mean, Nick Sirianni is still going to be in his ear. And if he's saying like, I want this play called there, he's going to call that play. So I don't think that'll change much. I mean, those guys, they communicate with each other a lot during the week. They go over the game plan in pretty stark detail and everything. So like Shane's not going to call anything that's totally going to like surprise Nick Sirianni. And so Nick's saying, what the heck are you calling here? I mean, why are you doing that? I mean, it's within, what's the best way to say it? Kind of like within a framework of certain plays, concepts they want to run. And then, Shane just picks one, but it's still within the framework of what they want to do. So I don't think it's going to be a big change over, what they've been doing in the past. I mean, I think that's kind of how they did it towards the end of last year as well.
Martin, this past week of workouts, at least the day that you guys were there and assume it was similar in the other 2 days, bunch of veterans, no shows for the Eagles. Now, this is not mandatory, so you're not obligated to show up, but first week of workouts with the team, you're kind of hoping the guys who've been there, done that, been part of a Super Bowl champion 5 years ago would show up. Am I making too big a deal out of this? I don't know the attendance numbers for any of the other teams that the Eagles will be competing with this year. So what were your thoughts when you got there and you saw how many people were there and how many people weren't?
Well, I mean, one of the things we don't know is just because they weren't there on Friday doesn't mean they weren't there Tuesday and Thursday, the other days when they had sessions. Maybe, you mentioned someone like Fletcher Cox. He might have been away the whole time anyway. I mean, you look in the past, like guys like Darren Sproles rarely ever showed up for spring practices and everything, and they are totally voluntary. So I wouldn't make a big deal out of it. I mean, I think some of those guys like maybe took off a day early for a long weekend or something like that. I think like some of them probably were there earlier in the week and they just skipped out of town on Friday. We'll find out more this week. I mean, some of those guys might show up this week. They might not. I mean, it's just, I don't know. There are some teams like I think wasn't it Sean Payton with the Saints, like, the last couple of years he didn't have spring practices at
Yeah,
all.
yeah. Well, part of that was pandemic related, but yeah,
Right.
then and with the pandemic when it first started, Sean was like, "All right, we're not going to do anything," and yeah, it didn't affect. I don't think it affects veteran players. I've said that for years, Martin, the
Yeah.
spring mark, but I do think it's important for the younger players just to get them,
Oh yeah.
from a teaching perspective and that kind of thing. So before we move on from the on-field work, because there's not much to it. And probably, by the way, offensive linemen, a bunch of offensive line were missing as well. Brett Toth was getting married, so maybe that had something to do with it. But on-field, anything jump out at you besides, I guess, Jalen Hurts looking pretty sharp? Anything under the radar?
I would say, well, you mentioned Jalen Hurts, obviously, and DeVonta Smith. I mean, he looked really impressive. I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah.
I noticed a big difference, from the beginning of last year. Training camp, he was kind of a rookie, not really sure of his spot, and I think he came back much more confident, much more assured of himself and everything. And I think, you know, from a 55-minute practice and stuff, you can kind of tell that he's at a different level so far this year. I'm expecting kind of big things from him. As for the other guys, I mean, Deion Kane kind of had a
Yeah,
pretty good
Dion. I
day coming
mentioned
out of
him. Yeah.
nowhere. He's kind of like one of those bottom of the roster guys trying to make us, trying to get himself a roster spot and everything. And he looked pretty impressive. I mean, they're the Eagles seem to be pretty well set at wide receiver, but for that sixth spot and everything, that could be up for grabs between a number of guys. Jalen Rager, Greg Ward, Deion Kane. He could throw himself into the mix and definitely get a spot if he has a strong
By the way, Martin,
training
people
camp.
should be excited by what you just said there. The Eagles are pretty well set at receiver. When's the
Yeah,
last time
right.
we said that? That's
Yeah.
that's that's got to make people feel good.
Yeah, well, like last year, we might have said the same thing, but at a different level. I mean, because everyone thought Travis Fulgham would be good. Obviously, and he didn't even make it out of training camp. But you would think with this group they have, yeah, they're definitely well set. I mean, you got DeVonta Smith, you got AJ Brown, you got Zach Pascal, you got Quez Watkins. I mean, that's a pretty good top four right there. And then you kind of round out the rest with the other guys who could include Jalen Rager, a former first round pick. I mean, you never know.
AJ Brown had an interesting quote over the weekend saying the Eagles have one wide receivers, himself and DeVonta Smith, who we just discussed, and you said looked good as a second-year guy, got the rookie kind of off of him. And I heard from a source that he's put on at least 4 pounds of muscle this offseason, that he is not quite the wafy wide receiver that showed up in Eagles camp that everybody questioned if he could take the rigors of the NFL, that he's looking significantly bigger. Am I overstating that, Martin?
No, I don't think so. Like I said, he's looking very confident, in his second year and everything. I mean, he seems like a different guy. I mean, maybe judging from a 55-minute practice is too soon, but to me,
We want firm declarations for the
I
entire
was really
season.
impressed with what I saw. I'll leave it at that.
Yeah.
And I think he definitely has the potential to have a really big year. And like you mentioned, AJ Brown is going to help him out tremendously. I mean, even if AJ Brown doesn't get the number one cornerback, that's going to make him a lot better, but he probably will get it. And then in which case DeVonta Smith is just going to run roughshod through his secondary.
All right, to me, the Deion Kane of the defense, Martin Frank, was Jared Maiden. I saw him flash a couple of times. And to me, again, we'll put all the caveats on it, but to me, that's even more important because the Eagles could use a safety. They could use a safety. I mean, they have receivers, so it's going to be really difficult for Deion Kane to do anything when Quez is there and Jalen gets back and Zach Pascal gets back. They need a safety. Is that a sneaky name to keep an eye on, Jared Maiden, for the Eagles in the defensive backfield?
Yeah, I mean, here's the thing about the Eagles safeties. They're not deep. I mean, they're unproven. Like, even if you want to take the leap and believe in Marcus Epps as a starter, which is fine, you can do that because he's got plenty, he's had plenty of experience, especially last year. He was kind of rotating in anyway. So, let's say you want to say you have a starting, a solid starting tandem in Anthony Harris and Marcus Epps. Who's behind them? You got Kayvon Wallace, who's unproven. You got, Maiden, who's unproven. Who am I forgetting? There was another
Andre Sacheret. Did you say him?
That's it. Yeah. Yes. Also unproven. He's more of a special teams guy. So, like, if Epps or Harris get hurt, I mean, who's stepping in? So yeah, you need a guy like Jaron Maiden to, prove himself and show that, if needed, he could be the third safety. He can come in, one of those guys, because I mean, that's the thing. Like last year, they had three pretty solid safeties in Rodney McLeod, Harris, and Marcus Epps, and they don't have that proven third guy now. So, one of those guys, Sacheret, Maiden, or Kayvon Wallace. I mean, Kayvon was a 4th-round pick in 2020. I mean, they've got to establish themselves. This is the year they got to do it. And, Howie Roseman was telling us the other day that, he's got faith in those guys, that they can do the job, that they're better than people on the outside think they are. Well, I mean, now's the time to show it. And, with Jared Maiden having a pretty good day the other day in practice, I mean, that's obviously a positive sign. But, you got to prove it, though.
Martin, with these being limited activities and no 11s on 11, 7 on 7 at best, that does give the offense the chance to look good. The backup tight end position, Dallas Goddard, of course, is going to be the number one guy, and a lot of people are projecting a Pro Bowl level type production season for him, as am I. Somebody's got to be there, TE2 and 3, depending on how deep you're going to go in both your sets and your play calling and your roster. Anybody jump up, not named Dallas Goddard, at the tight end position for you in the 55 minutes you had to watch Eagle football the other day?
I didn't really notice anybody stand out. I mean, I think Noah Togiai had a pretty good reception at one point. I didn't really see a whole lot from Jack Stahl. They do like Grant
Calcaterra.
Yeah, their 6th-round pick and everything. So, I think they have potential. I mean, it just wasn't enough to kind of get to make a first impression type of thing. But Calcaterra, I think, going into training camp will probably end up being the TE2 guy. I think they really like him. And before he had his concussions and everything, I mean, he was like supposed to be a top tight end on a really good Oklahoma team and everything. So, I mean, the potential is there. And, I think ultimately he'll be the number 2 guy, maybe Jack Stahl, number 3. Tyree Jackson still kind of working his way back from the.
But I was surprised Tyree was out there, Martin.
He was,
with
but he had a brace
giant brace on his right leg. But
yeah,
it's a positive that they let him out there, because you can get hurt if you're just standing around. Must mean he's progressing at least somewhat nicely. But yeah, I mean, that's a 9-month injury, so he's not going to be involved anytime soon. Want to shift gears to the front office. Julian Laurie gets in the building, and boom, there's 30 changes. 30 changes, Martin Frank. 30 different changes to the Eagles front office. 19 promotions. They brought in 11 people, I think were the final numbers, from outside the organization. And nobody to replace Andy Weidel, technically. What did you make of the shape-shifting of the Eagles front office?
Well, the overall thing is, like, I think it solidifies Howie Roseman's power as general manager. I mean, Andy Weidel, when he was here, as a top personnel guy, I mean, he would, he could say, oh yeah, I like this guy, but like now there's like no directly under him. I mean, he created the assistant general manager spot or title, I guess, with But the two people who he gave that title to are Alec Halaby and John Ferrari, and both of those guys are on the football operations side. So it's not like they're like head scouts or anything like that, like Andy Weidel was. So, there's another layer, I guess, of people who have to report to Howie, who oversees all of that. And so if there was any doubt about Howie Roseman's role beforehand, there isn't anymore. I mean, he's calling the shots. He's the one pulling the strings. And, he there's less of a buffer, I guess, between him and, the decisions that he has to make. I mean, he's pretty much going to be the guy calling the shots here on out, and there's no doubt about that anymore.
And the interesting aspect of it, and John and I have discussed this on the show here before, the quote-unquote titles. Assistant general manager has gravitas to it that means a team can't come in and steal a guy. And they have avoided the assistant general manager title up until this point. Now they give out two of them, and neither one of them on the football side. Do we read into this as you're suggesting Howie Rose is chief cook, bottle washer, king, everything else when it comes to any on-field football decision, player personnel-wise, or do they really just feel that strongly about Ferrari and Halaby that they want nobody coming in and scooping them up like they did several other key Eagles executives during this offseason?
Well, it's probably a little bit of both. I mean, a guy like Alec Halaby, he's a data-driven analytics guy. So, probably they don't want to lose him unless it's, to be a general manager. And, I guess they're hiring those kind of guys too, because that's who got the job in Pittsburgh. But I think what was surprising for the Eagles, maybe it shouldn't have been, was that Andy Weidel left and took a lateral move. He has the same title in Pittsburgh. So, that was kind of interesting. I mean, how he kind of, you might want to say like, maybe Howie was surprised at that because, why would, they thought maybe if Andy Weidel was going to leave, it was going to be just for a general manager spot. And if he didn't get the Steelers GM spot, he was going to stick around as the assistant GM, because why would you leave for a lateral move?
I'll tell you why, Martin, because they fired your younger brother and they fired your mentor. I'm not buying the Eagles spin on Andy Weidel, because I'm not saying they were pushing him out the door, but they weren't doing everything possible to make him say, hey, why don't I stay with the Philadelphia Eagles? Or am I being too harsh?
If I'm not mistaken, they could have blocked him, right?
I've tried to get that answer from Howie on a number of occasions. It's so murky because the explanation is if you have control over personnel, you can't block somebody. But by theory, assistant GMs don't have control over personnel. So it's kind of convoluted. I haven't been able to nail that down. But I do, and you were there, Martin, in 2016 when Howie came back, I think. And not came back, but came back from his exile. Jeffrey Lurie made a big deal about we got to hire a personnel guy and they got to work in collaboration. And I think when they ultimately hired Joe Douglas, he said something, Jeffrey I'm talking about, said something along the lines of, this is the most important hire of the year, or something of that nature. Really wanted a strong personnel guy to work in concert with Howie Roseman. And they had that with Joe, and then Andy, who was Joe's right-hand man before he got elevated. And now, not that they don't have guys, they have plenty of guys. They brought back Matt Russell, but he's going to be working from Denver. He's not going to be in the building. Right. They have Dave Caldwell, who's a former GM in Jacksonville, as an advisor. They're sort of in the Donahoe role.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And then it goes down to, I guess, Alan Wolking and Brandon Hunt. And there's a third. I can't remember. If you remember offhand, I'll look it up. But they're not at the elevation that Andy Weidel was. And, you no longer have that strong personnel executive. So
Right.
is this, generally in positions of power, when something happens, somebody shoots for that vacuum. Is that what we're seeing with Howie Roseman? Just saying, you know what? I'm tired of dealing with these layers. I'm in charge. Let me be in charge.
Yeah,
That's the take I get.
I think that's a lot. I think that's a big part of it. I mean, like I was saying before, I think it just solidifies Howie Roseman's power as like, this overseer who's going to make all the decisions and everything. And, like give Howie Roseman credit. Like, when he came up, he cut his chops like in scouting and everything. He was more of a
Yeah.
data analytics guy, and he went on the road. He learned how to scout and everything. I'm not saying he's a great scout and he makes great decisions or anything like that. I mean, obviously he's got an up and down kind of track record when it comes to the draft, but a lot of things like Howie said in the past, like if you look at the Jalen Reagor draft, you had one side saying, "Oh yeah, we got to get Reagor." You had the other side saying, "Well, we should get Justin Jefferson." And I mean, obviously, the obvious choice was to take Justin Jefferson.
Yeah.
And
And
I think
Howie was on the Jefferson side, supposedly.
yeah,
Supposedly.
I mean, yeah, supposedly, but like I think there were just too many voices in his ear, and he's like, you know what? If I'm gonna make a wrong pick, if I'm gonna make the bad pick, then it's gonna be on me. And if it, and then in which case he'll get credit if he gets the right pick. I mean, someone like DeVonta Smith, for example, or making the draft day trade for AJ Brown, he was kind of saying that like, he didn't tell anybody else he was going to do that. And he kind of like at the last minute pulled that one off. And much to the surprise of Andy Weidel, and Howie's quote after that was, "Hey, don't worry, I got you."
Then he didn't get him. He didn't get him.
No, he didn't.
No.
I need one more clarification on this realignment of the Eagles front office. Phil Baya is the director of draft management. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think the Eagles have ever had someone titled the director of draft management before. I think we can judge by the name what the position will entail, at least in part. Can either of you guys kind of describe what Phil Baya's job is going to be on a day in, day out basis as director of draft management?
Well, I kind of think it's like what John was saying. You got like two or three guys like in this vacuum, and maybe one of those guys will emerge like and become like an Andy Weidel type of guy. I think in this latest round of hires, they got pretty creative with some of their titles.
Yeah,
like,
I was impressed. I was saying, how long did it take you to think of these titles, these names of these titles?
Like director of getting my meals for me, type of thing. I think it's just kind of like a vacuum to see who would kind of like emerge from like three or four different roles and become like, maybe someone like Andy Weidel.
I joked about Julian Laurie, and we've joked about that off to the side as well. He's going to be the leader of the Eagles. If they're, who knows when? Obviously, Jeffrey's 70, so he's got no plans of stepping down. I'm not saying anything's going to happen imminently, but obviously, ultimately, Julian Laurie is going to take over the Philadelphia Eagles. He's reportedly very, very close to Alec Halaby, who is now the assistant, one of the two assistant GMs, as you mentioned, Martin, with John Ferrari. Any possibility there that there's the guy maybe that people don't look at or think about that much, that is reaching for that power vacuum, and he might have the back door. He might have the keys to the castle because he's close to Julian Laurie.
Yeah, it's very possible. I mean, Alec has been there, going back to Chip Kelly, when Chip Kelly got hired, I believe.
Yeah.
So
he and Doug clashed at times.
Right.
And that was one of the issues with Doug Peterson. Showing up after beating Green Bay. Hey, why didn't you pass the ball? That type of thing.
So when you look at it, I mean, he survived Chip Kelly, he survived Doug Peterson, and he's still here with Nick Sirianni. I mean, generally when you change like coaches and everything like that, you bring in a whole new staff, and that includes a little bit of the front office stuff. But here's a guy who's kind of, he's kind of like Jeff Stoutland. He's survived all of that, and if how he, especially in the front office, like when he came back in 2016, he could have cleaned house and gotten rid of him very easily. I mean, there was obviously the motivation to do that, but maybe Jeffrey Lurie said, "Hey, you got to leave Alec Halaby alone," or maybe Howie just said, "Hey, this guy can really help with analytics and stuff." So obviously they think very highly of him in the fact that he survived 3 different regimes and stuff. So I wouldn't be surprised at all if there's a bigger role for Alec Halaby at some point in the future, especially, if Julian Lennon eventually takes
Julian Lennon.
Oh
Yeah,
my gosh.
yeah.
Julian Lurie.
Yeah. No, I like Julian. Yeah. I
Yeah.
like that
So,
Julian Lennon drop.
and they're about the same age too. I think Julian's 27, Alex maybe 30.
Yeah, Alex a little bit older, but Alec looks like he's 27. So we'll say, looks very young.
All right, Martin, 'tis the season to compile lists and react to lists and have fun with lists. And we've done just that here on Birds 365 the last couple of weeks. So a new one over the weekend. Pro Football Focus came out with their power rankings for coaches, which between you and I did see one, and I was a little put off by the fact that Brandon Staley is rated ahead of Nick Sirianni. Both of them made the playoffs and got picked off in the first round. I actually think Sirianni did a better job of coaching the town he did than Staley did, and they were even in different tiers where one was a good coach and one was an average coach, and Sirianni came out on the short end. Here's a question I have for you. We read them, we comment on them, we take in what they say and then either debate it or agree with it. Do the players and or the coaches pay any attention to this stuff? They won't go on the record about it, I'm sure, but do you think they know how they're being viewed, how they're being ranked, how they're being rated? Does it have any effect on the actual individuals that are going to make those lists look good or look bad, the players or the coaches?
I don't think so. And I'll tell you why, because I think like if you're a head coach like Nick Sirianni and you're coming in for your first year, and like the minute you first get introduced to the press, you have that kind of awkward press conference and everyone's like, who is this guy? What the heck? And then like, before the draft last year, he reveals that he plays rock, paper, scissors. He does the flower pot. I mean, like, the only thing the players are concerned is like, can I play for this guy? Like, is he going to help me become a better player? Does this guy know what he's talking about? And obviously, as you saw last year, I mean, they decided that he does. I mean, they started out 2-5. Fletcher Cox is, questioning, Jonathan Gannon's defense, saying he can't play screens. They're not paying him to play screens. And yet, they go 7-3 down the stretch and they make the playoffs. So, and, Nick Sirianni changed up his offensive philosophy midway through, became a run bait. That's what the players are worried about. Like, they want to win games. They want to get into the playoffs and stuff, and they want to play for a coach that they respect. If they thought like Nick Sirianni was like a clown show or whatever, I mean, obviously he wouldn't still be here because, that would have been a total disaster and everything like that. So I don't think they look at it and say, oh my God, they have Brandon Staley rated ahead of our guy.
Yeah.
I mean, Brandon Staley did a good job with the Chargers last year. I mean, and maybe he got that edge because, the Chargers got off to a better start than the Eagles did. And, they ended up, being 9-8, same record and everything like that. And then, you look at what the Chargers did during the offseason. I mean, a lot of people in the AFC have them as a Super Bowl contender and everything like that. So, I don't think people are talking about the Eagles the same way, but still, I mean, the Eagles like playing for Sirianni. I mean, that's obvious. I mean, Jason Kelsey came back. A lot of the other veterans are still here and everything like that. So that says a lot about him. So I don't think they really care that Staley might be rated as a better coach than him. I mean, they like playing for him, and that's all that matters for the Eagles.
He is Martin Frank. Follow him on Twitter at MFFrankNFL, although he did some Phillies recently, Martin. The big turnaround with the Phillies hopefully continues. Read him, DelawareOnline.com. Wrote about DeVonta Smith, who had his big charity softball game in Allentown, as well as the great practice and the 2 deep balls from Jalen Hurts. Final one for me, we'll keep it with Nick Sirianni because we were talking about him. I do think he hears certain things, not those rankings, but he hears, he knew how he was taken after that first press conference, and he knew how the fan base took the Flower thing. And one of the things I'm impressed with Nick is he used it. I said, the players love that Flower thing. I told Jody that all the time. They loved it.
They joke about it. They still joke about it.
Yeah. And he used it to ingratiate himself more with the players. I think Nick Sirianni did a great job as a rookie head coach. I think he was the best rookie head coach. I think he was better than Brandon Staley. Yeah. Can he take that step in year 2? And do you like the CEO approach, or do you think he should stick with that play calling that we started?
I do like the CEO approach. I don't think every coach can do it, but I think Sirianni kind of has the makeup to do it. I mean, I don't think he's kind of guy where, it's my way or the highway. I mean, he's really good at delegating. He's really good at listening to his players and listening to his coaches as far as suggestions. I mean, I don't think he would shut anybody off. Like, I'll throw an example, like a contrary example, like Chip Kelly. I mean, it was obviously when he was here, it was like they're going to do it his way. Everything is going to be done, do it his way, and there's no variation whatsoever. I mean, Nick Sirianni, I mean, you obviously saw, like I said earlier, he changed offensive philosophies midway through the season because it wasn't working. So he's adaptable. I think it'll work out great, and I do think he'll have a better year this year. I mean, now that he's already established, second year and everything like that. He didn't really have any changes on the coaching staff. So, that's also a plus because everybody knows the system. He isn't like adjusting on the fly and everything. So I expect them to be better this year because of that.
All right, Martin, need you to weigh in on something John said in the first segment of today's show. He said he expects the Eagles to add another safety to the mix. At some point, we're going to get a veteran guy who's been there, done that with another organization. There are no starting safeties left out there. A guy would have to come in and work his way past the Marcus Epps to be a starting safety for the Eagles. Well, we got a couple of weeks after this week before camp hits. Last year, they signed Steven Nelson right before camp opened up. You agree with John or not that the Eagles will add one more veteran safety between now and the start of camp?
I do agree, just because I think they need the depth. I'm not saying whoever they sign is going to unseat Marcus Epps or anything like that. I think they're pretty determined to give Epps the starting role and see what he can do with it. But I do think they need more depth. As I was saying earlier, with the 3 guys behind them, I don't think those guys are quite proven yet. And I think they want to make sure, they're covered just in case. I mean, it's not going to be like a big fancy name. It's not going to be like a Bradbury or a Steven Nelson type of guy. But I think it is going to be a veteran who has kind of some experience and, can be a third safety if needed, or at least provide you the depth necessary to get through the season. Because, we've seen in the past, like the Eagles have been decimated with injuries, defensive back and safety and everything. So, I think they want to make sure they're covered in that sense. And I think they do need another guy just for depth.
Martin, great stuff as always. Go out, put a couple miles. Are you running this afternoon? You're going to get out there and run, or
no,
just
not today.
Not today. Good for you. I'll tell you what, I'll match you. I won't be running either. Martin, thanks for coming on with us today, buddy. Always a pleasure. We'll get you back in a couple weeks. Talk to you.
All right. Thanks, look forward to it. Thank you. See you guys.